This is a video I've been wanting to make for some time, but stuff is always in the rack and I'm usually doing other things. So when it came time to clean and do the studio cleaning that I've done in the last couple of weeks, and pulling everything out of the case and cleaning the case as best as I can for Arizona, I thought before putting everything back together, I would just roll the camera and kind of try to explain how I put things together, where I put my modules, and in what order and in what groups on the deck, basically. It's a little bit of an OCD thing. I do have some issues. Here is the rack rebuild. I'm not going to go through actually wiring everything and screwing everything in. I'm going to just lay things out. And that's another reason why it's laying on its back right now, is I kind of want to just put things in here and visually look at it for a day or two and see if it is what I really want, and then come back and wire it up. We'll start at the top left up here. In my rack setups, I usually put the MIDI top left as far as it can go, mostly because if it has a dongle hanging off, then MIDI cables can come up here or up the back and whatever, and they kind of stay out of the way. So I kind of like how that's over there. And then another ALM module, Pamela's, oops, hold on, I grabbed the wrong one. Let me take that back a moment. This is not the wrong one. This is actually the right one. You just haven't seen it yet, but this is Pamela's Pro Workout. So it's the new Pamela's Workout module that just came out. This is part of the reason why we're going to wind up with a season 3 of my modular journey, because there's just too much new stuff. Pamela's has always been great, but now it's even greater. So another ALM module over here, ALM, and then the last ALM module is the offset attenuverter ×2, and it's going to go up here as well. So another quick note about my brain and how it works is I do like grouping similar manufacturers together. There's no purpose behind that really, except how it looks. And you're going to see a lot of this, although I do try to still leave it functional, but you'll see how it lays out here in a moment. So I have a Laddick random trigger gate, the R112, so it's the newer version with the selector here. You don't have to pull it out and change jumpers. Random trigger gate goes here because it goes right next to the Laddick skipper. And again, this is because we're getting clock sources out of here anyway. We jump straight over here, and then we random up into skipper, and then that's how we're getting our probability up here. All this clocking stuff up here in the corner. So next up is what to do with those clockings, those clock outputs, and that is I usually put a WMD buffered mult right up here next to that, so I can jump right out of skipper and mult it. I can jump out of random trigger gate and mult it. Same with offsets if I want to mult one of those, or clocks. Since we're talking about WMD, let's do some more WMD. One of my favorite modules ever, Modbox. So that's also a WMD steady state fate combo. That goes right here, and again, these all have to do with each other. Sometimes I want to take a LFO out of Modbox into Skipper CV here to modify it, but I could also jump over to attenuate it first, and then, so you can kind of see. Are you smelling what I'm stepping in? It's kind of, that's where I'm going. Another random, and so here's another beautiful random option, ultra random analog, also by Steady State Fate. And so that comes up here. Here is the WMD time warp. So that time warp goes right here as well. Since we're talking about random voltages and or slews, I have after later audio steps here that it's going up in this section as well. And then an after later audio temps util, which is a clock and a whole lot more. But basically I use it for 6 different clock outputs. So again, I can take one clock out of Pamela's into here and get 6 more clocks. And now we have another one of my favorite modules of all time, and that is Ornament and Crime. This one is also by After Later Audio. And so is this one. And then my original one is by Mr. Siri. So I have 3 Ornament and Crimes here that I use primarily for enveloping. I have 12 banks of envelope generation here, and it's still not enough, but it's a good start. Really love the extensibility of Ornament and Crime. The Mr. Siri and one of these After Later Audios are in the default firmware mode, but the third one is hemispheres. It's not as deep as the default stuff, but it is it's good if you want some quick and easy. A lot of applications. I think there's like 50 of them, 50 applications in there. It's pretty amazing. All right, so now I'm going to build my first voice. And again, like I said, I've been using these for a long time now, and I kind of figure out what the things that go good together. So that's how I'm going to lay these out, at least for this iteration of this rack, and see if I like it. So right here is the Doepfer Quad VCO. And that is exactly how it sounds. There are 4 VCOs in here and a master channel down here, so you can play all 4 VCOs summed here. They can all go out into a VCF. So this is another new module, the 121-2 VCF. So that one we'll be talking about next year. And then finally into a VCA. I probably shouldn't say finally, because we do have to go to an effects thing. So here is VCO, VCF, VCA, and I can take an envelope from here, from one of these Ornament and Crimes to drive this. I mean, I could put this over here, you know, that kind of thing, but I kind of like everything together. For this Doepfer voice chain, generally speaking, it's going to be a mono voice. I'm probably going to take the saw out to the filter, to the VCA, come out of the VCA, and I'll want to go into the first DSP or effects processor, which is going to be disting. I usually leave this in a ping pong delay mode, and then follow it up by, because ping pong will turn the mono signal into stereo, and then the stereo signal can go into 2HP verb, which I just fixed, by the way. I just fixed it. And so it works again. So now it's back in play. So now this voice will have 4 oscillators, a filter, VCA, and then it'll hop in here and get a ping pong delay and reverb, and then head off to the mixer. So for my second voice section is going to be another Doepfer module, and this is again another new one that you haven't seen yet, but it's the A111-6. This is they call it the miniature synthesizer voice. So this actually has an oscillator in it, it has a filter, it has a VCA, it has an envelope generator, a small one, and a bunch of little modulation points for it. So this is a complete voice in itself, but in case I happen to want to use a filter, I'm going to throw the Wasp filter. The A124 will go next to that, and then of course here's a VCA. So if I don't want to use its onboard filtering stuff, which doesn't really matter, I can still jump over here and use this filter and this VCA. And I can also use these two from something else down below, which we'll get to later. To end this synth voice, we're going to throw Pico DSP, because again, it's a mono in, a stereo out. And then the very last thing in the top row is going to be the Trautonium ribbon controller, which will go all the way here to the right, because the USB cable's got to come up the case here, and I don't want it be in the way of everything else, so I'm going to put it up here and just stick it right in the side, probably get a little right angle and get it out of the way. And these are going to space out a little bit, because here's another thing I'm discovering now that I have this rack as big as it is I do have air holes in the back, as you saw before I put in the top row. There's air holes, but it still gets a little warm. So I'm kind of going to leave these little cracks in here to let it breathe. I want to be able to let the heat escape. Because now that I've added a second 168 6U case on top of this one's going to wind up with a little bit of extra breathing room down here in the bottom, so I can spread things out and make things a little bit more comfortable that way. All right, so that's it for row 1. Let's jump down to row 2 here. I do have some trouble with this rail. It's a little bent a little bit. By the way, this is a custom case that I built. There's another video about rack building that I could show you. All it is a rectangle. There's nothing fancy going on here at all. So some of my rails are a little wonky. When I decide to do this permanently, I'll buy some nice wood and hopefully do a better job of mounting my rails. All right, so to start the second row, I've got the mutable instruments modules here. I got marbles, which will go over on the left. Again, in a random section over here. It's got clocks, it's got triggers, it's got CV generation here. So this is kind of a a random thing up here. Marbles, I usually pair marbles and rings. Marbles will generate CVs and triggers for rings. Rings needs to be attenuated because it's a little loud, so I usually put veils right here. And of course we have plates, and then stages. This is the current amount of mutable instruments I have, unless you count Monsoon, which is a Clouds clone. This is kind of the first few modules that I purchased are these here. I like them being together because they work really well together. Plus, veils can be an attenuator or a VCA for any of the other voices that are nearby. Again, there's going to be voices down here, so they can reach up and use stages, LFO as well, in LFO mode or ADSR mode. Again, keeping these all in this area just makes them more accessible. To start the next section here, we have Popple, which is another after later audio, so that's why it goes right here. Don't ask why, again, that's my logic. So for my next voice, on row 2, I have one of my beloved chainsaws. I love this oscillator. I have 2 of them, so this one goes here, and I could use the stereo outputs to either go to a stereo Popple for filtering, or I can go to 2 different mono cinnamons. And cinnamon filters are pretty amazing when you start turning up the characteristics and overdriving it. These filters sound pretty darn amazing. So that's why I kind of like these all to be together as well, just for oscillator and filtering. So continuing with the next chainsaw voice. Here is again the second chainsaw. We're going to put it right here, and we're going to follow that up with a Zagreb stereo filter. Again, left and right out can go to left and right in, and it keeps the stereo path going. So really dig that. Before I move off of this, I should probably say here's where I'm a fanboy. Again, I'm going to squeal like a schoolgirl. I absolutely love Chaos devices. I don't have anywhere near enough Chaos devices. But so that starts the next section over here, because if you have a filter, you probably need LFOs. So we have Batumi and its little Poti, its little breakout box here. If you don't have enough filtering in Zagreb, now we also have Belgrade as a filter, which is probably my favorite filter in the box. No offense to anybody else, but I love this filter, especially when you start modulating it. And then of course the VCA. So now you have the voice. You have the voice filtered, you have the filter modulated, or this filter modulated, and then you take the voice out of the VCA again to the mixer or to an effect. So I actually forgot somebody all the way back here. I forgot that I wanted to put in another WMD mult. Another buffered mult, so it's the same thing as up here, and for the same reason. I may want to split some of these, either the LFOs coming out of here or things going in either direction. So I just wanted to have a mult, one up here to handle all this stuff, and then one down here to handle these. So after the Chaos Devices stuff, we have Oct, which is an 8-channel, what do they call it? Organic drifting LFO. So we put that over here to again reach either down or up to help modulate anything around it. And at the very end here we have Monsoon. The effects usually for this row will probably be Monsoon, which is a granular processor and has a nice reverb in it. And it is also one of my favorite modules in the entire collection. At the far right of row 2, 3, and 4, I have these Befaco ST mixes, because they're super simple mixes. They're stereo in and stereo out, or they could be 8 monos or 4 monos that are normaled all the way down. And all 3 of these rails here are just going to be where all the outputs end up. All right, so before we go any further, I'll just put all 3 of these here. So this is where all the sound comes down and goes into these various mixers. The volumes are adjusted here. These will always be here in every version of this rack, because to me that's where sound all flows this way and ends up down here. Outs is an IntelliGel outs. It takes the sum of all of these things and sends it out to the DAW or to headphones or wherever the distance, leaving the rack, wherever it's going. That's where it goes out of outs. All right, we're really getting down to the nitty gritty now. Here we have the oscillator row. I'm just going to start in the middle here. I'm going to put the Swan, the spherical wavetable navigator, is just going to go in here somewhere. I'm also going to use filter 8 for filtering these, or LFOs, either way. 4MS, again, 4MS modules close to each other here. I also have a Castor and Pollux by Winterbloom. This is a beautiful Juno-like voice. It's actually got two sides to it, so it's got dual voices. And here's another thing that you haven't seen yet, but it is the Woggle Bug. I've wanted one of these for quite a while, and just finally decided to pull the trigger on it. So I have a Woggle Bug to play with and learn. And then here, I'm gonna gush again for a moment. I have my very first piece of mini mod gear, and you don't understand how exciting this is for me to have even just one piece of mini mod. I want to build a mini mod system. It is very expensive, and I just haven't justified it quite yet, but precision voltages is something I can use with anything here, so I thought this was a good piece to pick up now, and inspire me. Every time I look at it, it will inspire me to start looking towards building the rest of that mini mod system, because I really do want that system. For these voices, there's multiple ways to route them out the box. One of the ways is through FX-Aid, which is going to sit down here. So any of these can go through FX-Aid to the mixer, or I can take all of these into the mixer and out of the mixer in through FX-Aid before it leaves. All kinds of stuff I can do with these mixer devices here. And I can also do multi-track. I've started learning how to do multi-tracking, where every oscillator, every voice, wherever the end of chain of that voice is, instead of going into a mixer and summing into left and right, it actually goes out into its own left and right into the DAW. So it becomes multi-track, and it's been challenging and interesting to learn how to do that. So that's probably a thing you'll be seeing me do a lot more in the next year. As for this bottom row, this is what I said I've offloaded a lot of stuff to another rack, which I'm going to replace this one with in just a moment and show you. The only thing left to put down here is another Behringer device that I picked up called the instrument interface. I started to become interested in how to get either instruments in here for either capture or recording or sampling, or I saw one guy with a microphone plugged in here singing into his modular and singing his voice going through the modular into the effects, and it sounded absolutely beautiful. So I literally ran to the internet and bought the another Behringer device. I absolutely love Behringer devices too. Not only are they sturdy and built really well, and just they're gorgeous. They're absolutely gorgeous. I love the look of these. Yeah, if you can't tell, I'm turned on by aesthetics a little bit. So that'll sit down here, and this leaves this bottom row open, or these rows open, at least for now, because I do plan to build the mini mod, and it might just line up in here nicely. I haven't quite decided how I'm going to work that out yet, but for now, that's this case. This is how this looks, so there's more to come. Don't go away. So we're going to move on now to the sequencer rack, and before I put this in here, you need to promise you're not going to laugh. Pinky swear. So this case, if you recognize these cheeks out here, these are the hardwood cheeks I made as prototype B. They come in pretty darn handy every time I buy new rail pieces and try to put something together. I could just slap whatever it is in there. But this is something I threw together last night, 10 o'clock at night out in the shop. Yes, I just decided to take some scrap wood and put a bottom on it so this can sit on something, and then a board across the back to hold the bus boards. Power supply, again, same thing that's going on over there in the other big rack, but this is just a 6U instead of an 12. But eventually, these are going to either become side-by-side 9Us, or it's going to be one big-ass 18U. I haven't decided yet. So another set of modules I got pretty recently were these Doepfer A178 Theremins. Now these are not sequencer modules necessarily, but I want the antennas to be somewhere where my hands can use them without getting in the way of everything else. So I figured putting it at the rack that's going to be below everything would probably be the best choice. Every good sequencer needs a clock, so Pamela's new workout, this is actually the first module I ever purchased in Eurorack, is Pamela's new workout. And because I have Pro in the other rack, Pamela's new workout comes down here into the sequencer rack. And down here we also have a random trigger and a skipper. You can tell I kind of like the clock, random trigger, skipper motif. I'm kind of following a theme here. The first guy into the sequencer is the Vermona Melodizer. It is a stochastic pattern generator and advanced control voltage quantizer. The next set of modules are also after-later audio, and believe me, I struggled pretty hard to not put these in the other rack next to the other after-later audio things, but I realize it's kind of a sequencer, so I'm going to stick it down here, and that is the Allen Turing and Enigma and Morcom units. So they're pretty sequencer-like, so they go down here. Next up we have data, because I always like looking at the things that are going on. And then the next thing is another new guy, a new kid on the block, and that's Tempe. And man, again, this is another thing. I saw this in almost every video, especially when I saw videos about Renee. There was always a Tempe next to it, so I finally decided, let's get it and see what it's all about. So Renee over here, Tempe over here, and data floats somewhere in the middle. And now something else that has become one of my favorite modules in all of my collection is, of course, NerdSec, a hybrid tracker sequencer. So NerdSec itself is a pretty insanely deep, beautiful sequencer. You start adding on the expansions, like here's another new one that just came in, more video. So I can actually take this little tiny screen and throw it up on a 40-inch television. And then of course there is the more CV. This is 16 more CV points. Oh man, and then of course more triggers. Here's 16 more triggers that you can use with NerdSec. And then finally, something I actually did want for a while and just didn't get it until I went and got the video one. It was the MIDI interface, because I like the idea of using the 3.5 millimeter MIDI for the next guy, and that is of course Bitbox. Bitbox Mark II. This little jack comes out of MIDI, will go right next door. It can drive all the drums off 1 or 2 MIDI channels out of NerdSec. The next amazing sequencer to come up, of course, is Eloquencer, and its little EME expander here, so it's also got MIDI in, out. And then, of course, what do you think goes in this slot? You want to take any guesses? 3, 2, 1, any guesses? Symphonian. I forgot somebody else. This guy was actually in the wrong box, and so I missed it. But I want to put the music thing, radio music, in this case as well, only because here's audio and here's audio, and they kind of would probably go nice together. So it's my brain thing. This could go anywhere. There's plenty of room in the other rack. But if this is just going to squawk out audio, it could be anywhere. Once again, let's just take a look here. Let me see if I can shove this back a little. So this is the sequencer rack. Just when you thought we were done, there's one more. All right. Do you remember this guy? How many times have you seen this empty over the last year and a half? The Behringer GO Case. My big racks are cool and fun. They're homemade, so there's nothing special about them. But I do love this Behringer GO Case. I wish I had a couple more. The only thing I would change is these sliding nuts. I'd get rid of those and put threaded strips in here, which I could do. I just haven't done it yet. 140 HP times 2. This is a case that I continually, even though I try changing things up, I always wind up putting the System 100 back in this case every time. And I don't know if it's a Behringer thing, but it seems to just fit beautifully in here, so let me just go grab some parts. Now, I've already done an extensive video building the System 100, so I won't go into too much detail here, but I'll just quickly fly through. We have the clock divider and the quantizer. I mean, if you haven't seen that System 100 video, maybe I'll link it up here in the corner. The quantizer helps rein in the voltages that are being spit out by these two analog sequencers that are extremely hard to tune. So having a quantizer is a great idea. It's a great idea anyway. So next in here is the Behringer 150, which is the ring mod. It's got stuff. Ring mod, noise, LFO, sample and hold. It's got all kinds of stuff in there. All kinds of fun stuff to play with in here. And then below that, I put my mult and my gates unit down below that. And then because I built the System 100 in twos, I have two of everything. And these are dual VCOs to begin with. So this winds up with 4 voices. You can see that here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot of these Behringer modules are dual units. So here's a dual VCF, 1, 2, 3, 4. Similar to the Roland System 100 modules. Here is a dual VCA. And here is a dual envelope and LFO. I also have the Behringer 172 here, which is the phase shifter, audio delay, another simple LFO, and a gate delay. Only recently started using these, and it's actually pretty interesting, the sounds that come out of it when I use those. Down here is the Behringer 297. So this one is another CV utility and portamento. I haven't gotten my head wrapped around this yet, but I do use the CV outputs here to drive the portamento, and it winds up sounding pretty good. And then lastly, for Behringer modules is the 305, which is a mixer, parametric EQ and mixer, and audio out. With this Behringer module, I can come out 3.5 inch, or I can come out 3.5 millimeter out to my DAW or to back into the big rack. I can also come out a 1/4 inch TRS here to go into, I don't know, an effects or pedals or whatever it is. I can come out of here 1/4 inch and then send it off to the DAW. And then the last thing is another new thing you haven't seen is the Behringer AC/DC. It's an audio interface. So you USB plug this into your computer and it becomes 4 channels of audio in and out from the rack. I kind of like having the System 100 all in one case as its own entity. Similar to what I would probably want to do when I get to the mini mod is probably buy another Behringer case and fill it up with as much AJH synth stuff as I can afford. I guess that's it. There are my 3 cases. There's the big 168 by 12U big main case, which now has room in it, which is wonderful because now I can buy more stuff. Then I also have the 168 by 6U sequencer case, our little rack that I built, which takes all my sequencers and puts them at my fingertips rather than having to work on the vertical case. I like that. And then lastly, I have this trusty old Behringer GO case that now has Behringer System 100 modules in it. And this one I can pick up and go. I kind of like that. That kind of wraps up what this video was all about, was just how I put things in place and what layout I have and why, what's the logic behind it. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching all this, and let's move on to the next subject, which I don't even know what that is yet, but I'm sure there's something. Thanks for watching.